All right. Howdy, folks. This is Chris White, and you're listening to Basic Business Advice. Today, I've got Ken Hostetler, partner at Eques Law Group, Jordan Stoltzfooth, the marketing director at Eques Law Group, and our guest today is Aaron Raber, president of Spray Foam Solutions, Inc. And Aaron, we're going to come to you in just a second. For our regular listeners, this is going to be a little bit different episode in the sense that we're going to be really focusing in on Aaron's business, why he does what he does, and some of the unique traits that he has chosen for his business, and just deep dive into who he is a little bit. So Aaron, thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to have you.
My pleasure.
Guys, I'm going to go ahead and just start our podcast today by turning it over to Aaron and saying, Aaron, tell us about you first. How did you get to where you are now? And then I want to hear more about Spray Foam Solutions. So what's your history? What's your personal history like?
Well, we go back quite a few years, 14 years old. I got out of 8th grade and put on a tool belt and started building houses with my dad. And did construction for 12 years, hit the recession, 2008, 2009. We didn't have houses to build, did not know what to do. And I had an opportunity to buy a spray foam rig. Mm-hmm. No idea. I never sprayed a drop of foam in my life, but it looked like hope of a better future. So I followed that path. There's a long story behind that. There was some dark years I went through, loss of a child, and just was at a pretty low place. But I did see a better path for me, for my family. And, with nothing more than a dream, I started Spray Foam Solutions. Had a 30 by 30 shop on my yard. That was the warehouse.
Yeah.
So from there till now, it's just been following that dream.
So with that dream, what has that become? What is Spray Foam Solutions now? What has it become since that time?
In many ways, it's just a bigger model of the same business. I think there's 18 members on the team now, with hopes of adding some more here in the next year and a half. But we're a installation company that just pays special attention to the detail, serving each customer with the integrity we'd want to be treated with.
Sure. Well, this is, just setting the stage. Sure. For anybody who doesn't know you, and anybody who doesn't know Aaron wants to see more about him, you can go to your website, sprayfoamsolutionsohio.com. And they can see a lot of some of the things that we're going to be talking about and deep diving here, because it's not just a matter of showing up and spraying foam into a building. It's not just a matter of punching in and out for you. By the looks of everything that you've done, this is an intentional workplace culture that you've tried to build here. This is an intentional place. And we can get into details. Some of these things are on your website, but why is workplace culture so important to you?
Well, early in business, I was seeking for core values, and I read the book by Michael Gerber, The E-Myth Revisited. That was the book that opened my eyes that, I'm just a technician spraying foam. I want to have a business, not just have a job. So I hired a business coach just right away after that and started intentionally diving into it. And they kept telling me, you need to have core values. And I'm like, what are core values? Yeah, we have values, but how do you define that? And I was driving up the road, listening to a TED Talk by Simon Sinek, and he said, Steve Jobs, we challenge the status quo in performance and workmanship with every product we design. And it just, boom, I got goosebumps on my whole body. And I'm like, that's what I do. That's what I do with my life. Mm-hmm. It lit me up. And so from there, my others just kind of built on that. So we started with a real strong core value base. And then workplace culture is, that's a challenging one. I want to be able to come to work. We all want to come to work and enjoy what we do, no matter where we work. And the number one thing is the people you work with and the culture that's around you there. So in our early years, I wasn't as strongly adhered to the workplace culture piece. And that caused some, negative outcomes. Had to let some people go. That's always challenging to do. So we have really, really dived into that culture piece. And what it's done is created this. It's just a fun place to work. Every Thursday we have our office meeting and we we start out, we probably laugh for 5-10 minutes because it's just everyone's joking, saying funny stuff. And you step out in the shop, the guys out there joking as they're loading up the trucks in the morning. And it's just one of my values is in our mission statement, it says to change the life of every person we come in contact with, even down to the person behind the counter at the gas station. We believe that spray foam insulation can change the world, not because of the product, but because of how we hold our cultural standards. And one day I heard someone at a gas station tell me, hey, one of your guys was ahead of me in line and he bought me a cup of coffee. He paid for my coffee. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're talking. We're changing the world. So it's a real personal thing to me, the cultural piece there.
Sure. That's something to say. That's something to really to come out boldly and put it out there that you believe that this can change the world. That is a hard thing to maintain, though. It's hard because cultural aspirations are one thing, but you wake up and you feel lousy one day or somebody cuts you off in traffic on the way to work. Maintaining those things apart from how we feel, how do you approach that with your team? I mean, people go through stuff. You talked about loss of a child. You talked about the journey that you've been on. Those things can take away from that aspirational focus on culture. How do you guys maintain that as a team?
I mean, that's a real challenge. It really is in any workplace. First off, I have to show up myself as the leader there every day with integrity, maintaining the culture that I want to have there. And, you know, the core values are not something on the wall that's just nice to look at. I mean, in our shop, we have a huge 8x10 sign on the wall with the core values right there. It's in front of our faces all the time. But, you know, it's a hiring, firing, it's part of that thing. I mean, if you violate the core values, that's a what's the word for it? I mean, those are some of the criteria we're looking at. You're called out on that. It's a work in progress. We've let people go simply because they couldn't maintain our core values of servant leadership. Servant leadership's a tough one today. People don't necessarily want to show up to serve. They want to. I shouldn't say that. We got a lot of people that do show up to serve.
Yeah. So. But not everybody does. Not everybody does. Jordan, Ken, what are your thoughts? What questions do you have for Aaron here as we get going?
Yeah, so I mean, I like how you got your start. You know, you had this opportunity, you capitalized on it, and it sounds like, you know, even when you were small, you realized, hey, I got to hire a business coach, you know, bring people in that can help me succeed here. What would you say to somebody who is in your shoes, you know, maybe graduated from high school or 8th grade education, whatever, wherever they are, and they have dreams, but they're not quite sure what to do? What would you tell them?
I mean, take the first step. Just you don't see the whole journey mapped out in front of you necessarily. I knew what my first step was, and it was figuring out a way to get strategic, to get the financing, to get that equipment. And so I took that step. And that's one of my strengths is I'll jump off a cliff and just go. It's one of my weaknesses as well, because then sometimes we don't get the greatest business plan laid out. I think it's a mix. It's a fine line between having a great plan, but you know that paralysis by analysis is what stops a lot of us from ever taking the first step. And once you take the first step, you feel that momentum. You'll take the next step. You'll take the next step. You just keep going because we can often see the next step. Have that big goal in the future so you know you're stepping the right direction. Earlier on, and then hire a coach. That is the best thing you can do. I've coached out of the 13 years. I've been coaching for at least 11 of those years. And I've paid a college tuition on coaching specifically on my business.
Wow.
Yeah, so I want to jump on Jordan's question a little bit because that was a great question. I want to follow up with that. As far as like your early employees, I think for a lot of guys, there's a lot of question marks of how do I kind of go from being that, I'm starting this. You talked about getting the financing and making so that you have the equipment, but then you've got to transition to where you're not just doing all of the work. You've got to start bringing some people in, and you've got to start building a team essentially. Talk a little bit about what it was like to have those first couple of guys and how they kind of fit into the picture of kind of getting into that next step.
That's a great question. I think I can, look back through my story and could tell you a lot of stories about where I did it wrong. I don't know if that's what we're looking for here, but it's a challenging one. For me, I hired the first couple guys and I was out there spraying all the foam myself because I was real picky about getting it done right, and I had them helping. So I wasn't training them properly because I was hanging on to control. But, I'm selling foam, I'm spraying foam, I'm doing the bookkeeping, I'm wearing all those hats. And
you're only working 40 hours a week though, right? I mean, not going over that.
Yeah, that would have been like 3 days of the week or something. So, yeah. And by the end of my third year in business, I was at this point of burnout that was just, we'd had a child that year that didn't sleep much at night. So it was low sleep, everything compiling on top of each other. And I was so burned out. I was getting 20 phone calls a day with my phone in the truck, coming back these voicemails. When do I answer them? You do good work, you get high demand really quick. So it was a challenge. And then I offered my older brother a job as a salesman. I said, hey, shut down the family business, just come sell spray foam. This could be a lot easier for you. I'll hire your carpenters and let's go. And then after reading, the E-Myth about being a business operator, running a business, I just jumped back out of the technician completely and said, run, go, without setting the proper parameters up front. That was my weakness. So I kind of stepped out, had stepped back in, step out, step back in, stepped out. I probably did that half a dozen times, and I don't know that it was necessarily the wrong way of doing it. Every time I'd do it, I'd see, well, this part breaks. This part breaks. There's a great book called The Best CEOs Are Lazy, and I love the book because it really dives into that. Really, you step out, see where the hose kinks. Oh, and kink that, step back in. So when I look at it from that angle, I think that was potentially not the worst thing in the world. Just a lot of trial by learning is what I did. I'm not saying it was the perfect way of doing it, though.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So by the time you talked about burnout in that third year, and then you brought your brother in. At what point did you start being able to say, hey, like I can step in, I can step out, and I'm feeling comfortable? Did that come more at like year 10, or like how long did you have to go until you felt like, hey, I've got a team here, we're moving forward?
I would say about 2015, 2016. So about 6-7 years in, I hired a general manager. And that was a big piece in freeing up me in the day-to-day operations. I tried to step out prior to that, and it would never work. I went through a pretty massive life transition, grew up in a conservative religion, left that, so there was a shunning involved and all that. So it's pretty much of a life change during that period of time. And it took me, I'd say 5-6 years after that to really get my feet underneath me and feel like I could put the momentum on the business again. And then right at the tail end of that, 2020 hits us, and so put us for another spin. So, but I feel like we've really got some great traction right now. So
That's awesome.
I think that was a great question, Ken, because so many guys, when you reach that point and you bring somebody else in who taking on some of the things that you've been doing day to day, there's a bit of an identity crisis of what's next. How do I add value now? I'm not doing everything I was doing before because I recognized I shouldn't be doing that. Somebody else should. How was that for you? Immediately following up after that decision, did you find yourself in a place where it was like, hey, everything's great now? Or did you find yourself starting a new journey at that point in time?
That was probably one of the more challenging pieces of it because I had so much personal value tied to hard work. That was work ethic was just what we grew up on. So now I'm not contributing on a daily physical level that I can see. And I really struggled with, where am I adding value here? And that was, again, working with a great business. Actually, I've been using Vistage for my business coaching for the last 5 years. But a great coach there really helped me to see where I add value. it's a process there. That's probably one of the hardest ones business owners will have to face as we step away. For me now, I realize it's me showing up energetically. It's me showing up with my charisma. It's me showing up as who Aaron is meant to be at the business, providing that leadership. I think one thing I did early on, though, even in that first years, was, it's abdication versus delegation. You say, here's a task, do it. And they go, do it, but they don't have clarity on where they want to go. So I think as leaders, that's our job, is to really learn how to delegate properly versus just giving the tasks out, especially in those transitionary spaces there, if that makes any sense.
How long did that take you then? How long was it? A process of months? Was that a process of years of finding that kind of comfortability and being what you needed to be for the business now?
5 or 6 years for me.
Yeah,
it was not an easy switch.
Yeah, I think we've seen a number of small business owners who, you get into the business because you're good at doing something or you have an idea about doing it. And Aaron, I think you said perfectly, your identity becomes that thing, that you did that. And then if you're going to grow, though, and I assume based on what I see from you is that choice to bring in somebody else to manage led to further growth. If you're going to grow, you got to get out of your own way. And you got to bring in people who are good at doing what they're better at doing, what you weren't that great at doing, so that you can do what you really need to do inside the business, which is lead. And that's a hard transition. We've seen that happen a number of times. Aaron, I want to switch here real quick to the website. I was looking down at the spray foam way, and there's so many statements here we could jump into and talk about with that. But you say one that I think is so interesting. We only say thank you when someone brings us a suggestion or a correction. What does that mean?
It's about shifting blame. You have a lot of times I suggest a correction or you bring something to someone and they can come up with 1,000 different reasons why they did it the way they did. But it really prevents them from hearing what you're actually saying. So when we present it that way, to me, it's just a great way of thank you. I appreciate it. And it actually comes from my Vistage group I'm in. When we have a problem we're presenting to the group, we go around, they'll ask background questions. And then once they're done with background questions, they'll come with solutions. And half the time when someone brings a solution, the person receiving the solution will have, well, but if we would, this is the reason that solution doesn't work. And they'll come up with all kinds of mental excuses immediately on the spot. And all we're allowed to say is thank you. So that's where it originated from. But it's really powerful because it gets you out of the way.
That's a huge amount of humility.
It's a challenging one.
Jordan, Ken, you've got that pulled up too. Does any of these other ones stand out to you as ones that you'd like to ask Aaron about?
Well, I'm curious. I want to dive into that one a little bit more. So let's say somebody, I don't know, you might have a corporate hierarchy of people who, managers, whatever, workers. Does that go both ways? If managers go to workers and say, you did this poorly, they obviously have to say thank you. Does that go the other way as well? Can your people who are out there boots on the ground doing the work, can they also lead up and say, hey, we're not, we think this should be done a little bit different? How does that work?
Yeah, that would go both directions. So one of our core values is servant leadership. So that's flipping that pyramid on its head. And we're here to serve. So they would have every right to come to us. Now, that doesn't mean that we can respond with thank you. That doesn't mean you take every critique and criticism and implement it. We can see the big picture sometimes that someone in one spot can't see. But we hold that very, carefully when someone does bring something to us. We always want to look at it.
Ken, is anything on there, something you want to ask Aaron about?
Yeah, there's a lot of them on here that are really great. I think the one that immediately stuck out to me, just because we don't often see this, and I so appreciate what you're saying with this about holding these emotions. You have on here, we are kind and friendly even when we are angry. And there's a lot of opportunities, working with other people, both outside the business, inside the business, of where things can be frustrating and things can be, really difficult. Was there a particular experience that you had that brought this on, or was it more just, hey, this is something that's important to me, that I think should be one of our values?
Well, as a person personally, I've always had a very high level of emotional control in some ways. I think partly my upbringing maybe caused me to suppress some emotions that wasn't in an unhealthy way. But we've had some issues on job sites where we have an employee, a newer hire, that gets, fired up and almost gets violent. And so we just created that we're creating a structure. Doesn't mean we follow it perfectly, but this is the pattern we want to live by. And so then someone steps outside of that variation, you can just point to the spray foam way and say, hey, we're in violation of how we operate here. This is something we want to do. And it's not a random thing you're just pulling out of your pocket then to them. They know it as well. So
yeah, that's awesome.
That's a hard one. Talking to people about emotional intelligence, talking to them about how they feel, when I think a lot of us experience, people just feel, and they're not necessarily being intentional or unintentional about it. They're just feeling, and then what's happening is coming out of that. Do you find those conversations to be challenging, where you're like trying to point out, hey, this is not an okay way to act out, basically throw a temper tantrum? How do those conversations go?
Well, emotional intelligence, like you said, is a challenging one. We do, like a lot of our hires that are interacting with people on a regular basis, we do a full disc profile, which shows, EQ is one of the hiring metrics we go by. So me personally, my goal in life is to be a person that helps others, emotionally, to be a coach in some ways. I don't feel to be a full-time coach, but so I'm coaching my team on the regular. We have a Thursday morning meeting in the shop, and I'll address some of these things on the regular. We had this situation come up. This is how we could have handled this here. If it's with an individual, I'll sit with them and say, there's nothing wrong with being upset about this here. There's nothing wrong with being frustrated by this here. The way we handled it created the opposite result of what you wanted in the situation. If we address it in a way that is upbuilding, now you bring them onto your team and they want to help you out. So it's just some real simple education on those things. And it's a lot of repeating yourself, because this stuff isn't taught like it should be in anywhere. Yeah. So, but I use it as, that was one of my things through the years. There was quite a period of time when I'm like, is this even what I want to be doing? Spray foam solutions. But when I really stepped into this space of, I'm here to help improve these guys' lives. The longer they're with my company, they'll leave here better equipped to go out into the world. I'm coaching them basically as a mentor. Then that's gave me a lot of excitement and enthusiasm about being there. So this is just a big part of who we are.
You put another one. It's the last one on here, which this would seem like something that maybe would not go on a list. But you said, we're clean, tidy, organized, and we put things back where they belong. To make that a statement on your webpage as part of the spray foam way, why is that so important to call that out?
This, originally is designed for an interior piece. This is just how we are, who we are, how we operate. I mean, we have people step into our warehouse. It's a 70 by 100 warehouse there, and they're like, "Wow, this is clean. This is amazing." Like the amount of times I hear that comment. But even with that, we have this issue with not putting back the tool. All of a sudden, the 5/16 is missing again. And so we just put that in there, just as a reminder when stuff gets missing. Hey, we're not operating by our own standards, and I think it's just a powerful statement for who we are as a company, how we operate.
Well, I think it sets expectation in your consumer, expectation in your people, and expectation can be a hard thing to set, because when you don't do it, people go, "Hey, you said you would." Have you encountered any situation where you're like, "Yep, we didn't meet that expectation"? How did you handle that?
Yeah, we absolutely have. I mean, you're not going to be in business 13 years without doing that. We have uncompromising customer service on that. We will go back. We have fixed every job where that has ever happened. there was one in the last year where that happened, where it was that proper expectations were not set properly on the removal of insulation in an attic we were doing. And, I just went out there personally, had a good conversation with him. We worked through it, do our best. But yeah, those are challenging ones there.
I found, and Ken, you come from a construction background too. Sometimes there can be a lot of assumption about what's going to happen because we know what we need to do to deliver on this. And so how essential is communication during those processes with anybody you're working with? How essential is that communication?
I mean, it's imperative. It has to happen. Have it spelled out clearly what we're doing. And that's probably been one of the biggest challenges as we've grown, because now you got someone answering the phone, hands it off to salesman, hands it off to production manager, hands it off. And all those steps, if you don't have the proper pieces lined up, we get out on the job. And that's really what happened on this job what we had here. There was a discrepancy between the customer's understanding and the salesman's understanding of what was happening. We get to the job, the customer says something to the employee that's there, great team member, he doesn't know, and it was just this shuffle of communication. So what do we do with that? We dropped the ball here. I can chew out the salesman for messing up his job, or we can come back as a team and say, where did we drop the ball? How do we fix this so it doesn't happen again, and we make our company that much better because of this mistake? I don't call them mistakes, I call them learning opportunities.
I've had a couple of those. I want to go back to something that you talked about in a minute, but Jordan, before I monopolize all of our time talking to Aaron here, do you guys have any follow-up questions? Anything you want to ask about?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm curious about, obviously you've done a great job of building a culture, and I'm sure part of this goes into that. But as far as retaining employees, obviously that's been one of the more difficult things for companies over the last couple of years. Is how do you bring in new talent? How do you retain the employees you have? Is there anything that you can speak into that you say, hey, this is something that's really working great for me?
Well, we have a great retention of our employees there. My goal is to be able to pay above the average. That's challenging right now with where everything's going. But then again, creating a workplace where they want to come to work is number 2 on that. And during those, those first months after everything shut down, the employees were coming back. We were shut down for about 3 weeks. There's all these employees didn't want to come back because they could make more sitting at home. Every one of my employees wanted to be back working. That speaks for the culture we've built there. And it seems like as we have up-leveled our culture more and more, those that are not a cultural fit, they just kind of quit. Not 100% of them, but that's been kind of the theme we see. And as what I've been doing recently for myself is just, trying to connect personally with each and every hire we interview, have, some person, like I do a FaceTime call with them right after the initial phone call, just 5 minutes just to get that first connection there. I think it's important that we show people they're valued as a team member, as family. That's really, we work together every day. We're with our team members more than our families often. So that's the biggest thing right now is culture. I mean, I know it's a buzzword that's overused right now almost, but it's true. Without a culture, you will not retain people in this environment.
Aaron, what do you do outside of work that you feel like makes you a better business owner? Obviously, you spend a lot of time at Spray Foam, running the place, leading your employees. Is there anything you do outside of there that you feel like just makes you a better operator, better owner, and better person?
Yeah, that would be fishing.
I like that.
I
Any particular type of fishing?
I started fly fishing about a year ago.
Okay.
But that was something I'd kind of laid down was my hobbies over the course of time of building the business. And then I got to the space where I had the space to do it, but because I got out of the habit, I wasn't doing anything. Wasn't really doing anything that filled my cup, made me feel alive. And about, right June of 2020, everything was crazy. I'm like, this is not working. And I went and bought myself a kayak and I started fishing. And yes, steelhead fishing, trout fishing. I'm going to go hopefully this afternoon try to catch some bass on a fly rod. So it's good stuff.
Very cool.
Nice. Well, Aaron, I want to come back as kind of we look towards wrapping up our talk with you. You said something in an answer earlier that I'd like to ask you about, and that is, you said there was times when you weren't sure that this is what you wanted to do, but you've been at it now for almost a decade and a half of doing it. I have heard business owners express that same sentiment, that they get into it and they have this self-doubt. They have these questions. What got you through that? What got you past that point of doubting whether or not this was the right thing for you to be doing?
Well, I heard someone describe a term. Angela Duckworth has a book on it called grit. Grit is what got me through a lot of things in life. That fire in the belly, push through. There has been really hard times I've had to go through to get to where I'm at. But one of the big things that somebody said to me was, are you tired of running your business, or are you tired of running your business the way you've always run it?
Wow.
And that's a mindset coach I'm working with. And that just completely flipped it on its head. I'm like, oh, yeah, if I was running any business the old way, yeah, I'd be sick of that too. It has nothing to do with the business. It has to do with the way I've been operating. So sometimes it's just something as easy as hiring a mindset coach, somebody that can come in there and help you reframe your mindset on it. And for me, that was the big flip, was that, oh, okay, we can switch this up and it's a different business now. So
that takes a lot of courage in and of itself. A lot of personal journeys to go through that. So, Aaron, this was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning. And for any of our listeners, if you want to see more about Aaron, you want to read his full list of the Spray Foam Way and anything about that, you can go to their About page on sprayfoamsolutionsohio.com and check this out. Aaron, I get the vibe off of you that if anybody had questions and maybe was on a journey, you might be a guy they could reach out to.
I am absolutely open to that. And I'm going to speak to actually mental health for just one second.
Go for it.
Because that was a big one for me. I went into, probably get emotional here on you, but I went into a pretty dark depression for about close to a decade. Yeah, it's 2016. It got so dark that I just didn't know where to turn. It was those days where, heading down a road and you see a car coming towards you and you're like, man, if that car come across center, it'd just take me out. It'd be a lot easier right now. It was that dark. And I finally had the courage to reach out to someone for help. Scariest call I ever made. I was afraid she was going to say there's nothing wrong with me. And then what? And growing up, the way I grew up, depression was a sin. You just need to pray to God and he'll help you out. Well, that wasn't working. And didn't have any answers. That first phone call, I was completely heard by somebody. It changed my life. I did something called neuro-linguistic programming, just a couple Zoom calls, and I was back in the light and on a beautiful trajectory from there. So I'll put it out there for any of you, struggling with mental health issues, reach out to someone, and I am always open to talk to anybody that's struggling about anything like that. That's one of my passions is, especially helping men get in touch with their emotions, get in touch with who they are as a human. We need strong men. We need strong leaders in this country. Really, we do.
That's awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Well, folks, for Ken, Jordan, and our guest, Aaron, today, this is Chris White. Thanks for listening in. That was awesome.